is shocked in an adjacent cage. He argued this was a sign of anxiety and a possible sign of empathy. Then, in 1962, George Rice and Priscilla Gaynor at Agnes Scott College went a step further, arguing that rats would try to save other rats in trouble. In their experiment, rats were placed in two adjoining see-through cells. One of the rats was put into a harness and hoisted above ground, an unpleasant experience that caused wailing. The free rat in the other cell could then push a lever to lower the harness. Rats would push the lever to free their fellow rats, but wouldn't push the lever if a block of styrofoam were being hoisted. Rice and Gaynor concluded that this behavior might be homologous to altruism. But other psychologists at the time weren't convinced by these conclusions. They easily found alternative explanations for the rat behavior. A rebuttal article in Science argued that Rice and Gaynor's rats were simply responding to the loud noise of the other rats' screams. These critics showed that rats would use the lever to free anything making a loud noise, not just their fellow rats. This wasn't empathy, their argument went. This was wanting their fellow rats to shut up. Undaunted, other scientists kept searching for animal empathy. A few years later, in 1964, scientists found that rhesus monkeys will consistently suffer hunger rather than secure food at the expense of electroshock to another. Jules Masserman, who once served as a president of the American Psychiatric Association, also noted that rhesus monkeys were more likely to go hungry for those they were familiar with. Most psychologists, however, refused to believe that animal empathy was possible. The field was dominated by behaviorism, which held that animals don't have observable mental states, just actions. Behavior could be understood in terms of rewards, punishment, competition, and consequences, but not emotion. Whenever animals displayed behavior that looked like empathy, behavioralists could easily attribute it to stimuli response. And for a long time, the skeptics prevailed. Scientists simply didn't have the tools to demonstrate that animal empathy was real. That is, until Jeffrey Mogul, a geneticist at McGill University, noticed his mice behaving oddly in the early 2000s. Though he hurts mice for a living, Mogul says it's not for a lack of his own empathy. His research is about understanding why two people may experience pain in different ways, with the hope of developing better pharmaceuticals for managing it. My sympathy is mostly reserved for chronic pain patients, Mogul tells me. For decades, Mogul and his team have conducted experiments testing the pain threshold of mice in order to see what role genetics play in pain tolerance. In one experiment, the researchers would take a mouse from a cage, restrain it, and then dip its tail in a hot 120-degree Fahrenheit bath. They wanted to see how long it would take for the mouse to yank its tail out, a measure of how well the animal withstood pain. In the early 2000s, Mogul and his team began analyzing data from thousands of tail dip trials, and they happened upon a bizarre pattern. The order in which the mice were tested in each trial seemed to matter a lot for pain tolerance. That is, on average, the first mouse taken from a communal cage and dipped in hot water experienced the least amount of discomfort. The second one felt a little more, and so on. That was really, really surprising to us, Mogul tells me. It was as if the first mouse had somehow told its cage mates, "That really hurt," and upon hearing that, the other mice winced. Mogul's was the first evidence that animals other than primates could experience emotion contagion. This is considered by many to be the most basic form of empathy. When I see a broken arm, I wince. When one mouse is in pain, others feel it. Mogul staged several follow-up experiments to solidify his hunch. First, he repeated the tail-in-water test, but instead of putting the mice back into the same cage, he put them into a different one. When that happened, he says, this effect goes away completely. Another test showed that mice feel greater pain when they are around other mice in pain. This is especially true if the mice know one another. That is, they were cage mates beforehand. That was just the beginning. Mogul later showed that mice were capable of consolation, another sign of empathy. In one